Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Coalition of Master Scholars on Material Culture's annual symposium, What is Material Culture? Thank you so much for joining us this morning or this afternoon, no matter where you are joining us from in the world. My name is Christine Staten. I'm a member of the Symposium Committee for CMSMC. The Coalition of Master Scholars on Material Culture, or CMSMC, is a platform born online dedicated to helping emerging and established master scholars by providing a space to publish their work and contribute to the expanding field of material culture. CMSMC was created after we ourselves experienced the difficulties facing those with master's degrees in fields concerning material culture, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Funding, jobs, other opportunities, they were, and in fact still are, scarce. Our platform is not associated with a university and is run by fellow master scholars. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our online publication is similar to an undergraduate review, and we aim to fill a gap for those earning or possessing a master's degree. These scholars are often competing with doctoral students or established academics for publication in other journals. In the 4 years that our site has been live, we have published almost 80 articles with more in the works, had over 45,000 unique readers on our website, and have hosted 5 previous symposia. If you're wondering about ways to get involved or support CMSMC, there are several opportunities. You can make a tax-deductible donation via donor box. We have a store on our website where we are currently selling apparel. We are completely funded by your support, and any financial contribution is greatly appreciated and helps support our mission. We also encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on our future symposia and other professional development and networking opportunities. All of this information can be found on our website, and we encourage you to reach out to collaborate. For our 2024 symposium, we addressed the question, what is material culture? Material culture is an intentionally broad term meant to include everything from objects to art to ritual dance, ephemera, tools, and sacred rites. However, when we analyze material culture through an academic discipline, be it anthropology, archaeology, art history, or conservation, it assumes sociological, political, and spiritual meanings. Attempting to define the term challenges us to consider not only how we understand material culture, but how we approach it. What is material culture encourages scholars in related fields to critically examine what they take for granted. As students, we are not asked to define the traditional vocabulary of our disciplines. Our topic, therefore, urges emerging scholars to consider their biases and how they affect methodologies, queries, and pedagogies. We will continue to explore this theme with an upcoming round of publications. CMSMC has traditionally published bi-weekly during the academic year, but we've now moved to a more traditional journal style with a more concentrated publication. We publish annually in the fall around the theme of our symposium, and our next issue will continue to center around this topic, what is material culture? Our call for papers for this issue is now live on our website, and we will share a link to it in the chat. And we encourage submissions with a due date of June the 10th. So now it's with the greatest pleasure that I introduce our panelists for today's symposium. Damian Sabatini will start our morning off with his presentation, Visualizing the Universe, the Role of Pictures in Mediating the Relationship Between People and Outer Space. Drawing on his research among amateur astronomers at 2 London astronomical societies, he argues that the objecthood of pictures, understood from a material culture perspective, plays a key role in shaping people's relationship with the universe, which is influenced by new technology and more accessible ways to capture and share pictures of the skies. He explores the role of photographs in mediating the relationship between people and the universe. Sabatini is an anthropologist from Chile interested in material and visual cultural studies, digital anthropology, anthropology of techniques, media studies, and anthropology of outer space. In 2023, he completed a master's degree in material and visual culture at University College London, supported by a scholarship from the Chilean government, where he developed an interest in extraterrestrial anthropology. Next will be Joe Cimino. His presentation, Materials of the Past, Discerning Digital Materiality as a Method for Analyzing History, will discuss his project Leviathan from 2023. It's partially inspired by Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick, and it explores the material history of oil and resources harvested from animals during the height of the Industrial Revolution, investigating how we can trace these effects well into contemporary times. Through layering archival footage, found footage, and his own, Leviathan approaches this history through an empathetic lens, resulting in a moving collage of images and sounds from the past and present to fathom how this lucrative idea devastated ocean ecology and human lives alike. Cimino is an Italian American time based media artist, musician, podcaster, and adjunct professor currently based in the United States. He has a BFA in studio art from Rowan University and an MFA in studio art from Studio Arts College International in Florence, Italy. Cimino has exhibited his work both in the United States and internationally with solo and group exhibitions in Florence, Gimpo, South Korea, Chelsea, New York, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Dansk, Poland. He is also a member of the international artist collective Teleportal. His artistic practice investigates what familiar materials and nostalgic feelings reveal about human perception and how, if at all, they play a role in determining what goes unnoticed. Next, we'll hear from Luli Zhou. Her presentation, Beyond Scientific Analysis, Reconstructing Narratives of a Lacquer Box from Canton to Long Island, New York, will explore the Sylvester Manners Canton black lacquer box and its provenance, which was confirmed through material analysis. With the help of scientific tools like X-ray fluorescence and Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, historical research, and previous scholarship, the provenance of this tea box can certainly be confirmed and gives us a glimpse of the Sylvesters as a wealthy family following European tastes while pursuing high social status at the time. The analysis and research of the materials and techniques used to create this tea box can also contribute more evidence for the technical art history research in Canton, export lacquerware, and fill some research gaps in the scholarship. Zoe is currently an MA student at Bard Graduate Center. She holds a BA in history and an MSc in conservation. Previously, she worked as a research fellow at the Preservation Society of Newport County, conducting a lacquerware conservation study. Additionally, she interned with the Bureau of Historic Sites in New York State and various Chinese cultural institutions. Lili has presented her research at the American Institute for Conservation, the College Art Association annual conference as well. Passionate about Chinese export wares and chinoiserie objects, especially lacquerware, she combines conservation and object-based material culture methodology to explore narratives behind contributing to a broader understanding of 18th and 19th century America and China's cultural communication. And our final emerging scholar speaker is Rachel Nelson. Her presentation, Material Culture and Context, interrogating the cultural attribution of a red figure Stamnos at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, analyzes the display of a red figure Attic-ware Stamnos at the MFA, which classifies, the Stamnos as being of the material culture of Athens, Greece. This is the vessel's culture of production. However, the Stamnos was discovered in the italic context, yet any discussion of this beyond a note in the vessel's purchase is absent from museum materials. She calls into question that one-dimensionality of single culture attribution and highlights a few of the complexities of dealing with objects that are linked to intercultural trade and exchange, particularly in the ancient Mediterranean. Nelson is an archaeologist and art historian whose research focuses on the material culture of the Etruscans and the relationship between material and visual culture in the ancient Mediterranean. She completed her BA in classical archaeology at the Fine Arts at St. Anselm College, during which she participated in excavations with the Mediterranean Institute of Archaeology in Orvieto, Italy, working on Etruscan and late Republic and early Imperial Roman sites. In 2023, she received her MA in the History of Art and Architecture, as well as a certificate in Museum Studies from Boston University. And then we'll hear from our keynote speaker, FBI Special Agent Jake Archer, who I will return later on to introduce. And following his keynote address, there will be a question and answer session with all our panelists. And finally, before we continue, I would like to thank my fellow Symposium committee members, Perry Butch, Reb Zhu, Mally Radford, and Sarah Henslick, without whom the symposium would not have been possible in the slightest. So without any further ado, here is Damian Sabatini.
Now, yes. Perfect. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Damian Sabatini. I am a social anthropologist from Chile who has finished a master's degree in material and visual culture at UCL, and that's why I'm here to present my investigation. As you can tell, English is not my first language, so please let me know if you don't understand something. So my investigation, as the title says, is about the role of pictures in mediating the relationship between outer space and people. And for exploring that, I spent 2 months with among amateur astronomers at two London Astronomic Society. First of all, I think that it's important to mention two theoretical considerations. First, what has been called objectual turn. This is the proposition that pictures can be understood as objects. This proposition was made by Elizabeth Edward and Janice Hart and proposes a shift in the study of images, proposing going from a semiotics perspective to an objectual focused one. What they call photo objects situates the physical properties of photographs as central to their objectness. Walton, however, recognized that despite such an orientation, a capacity for representation remains a fundamental part of how and why images exist and are efficacious in contextual places. In practice, both focuses tend to be mixed when images are analyzed. Second, it is also important to bring Alfred Yale's theory of agency. Yale proposes a theoretical framework that emphasizes on the performatic effects of things on social life. This perspective underpins an analytical tradition that emphasizes the effects of images on people. The relevant question, says Christopher Binney, becomes not how images look, but what they can do. Having that in mind, I will now start explaining my findings. So I started my thesis analyzing the effects that pictures exert on people. First of all, I identify an astonishment that people feel when they observe astronomic pictures, something that provokes reactions on them. Bobby, for instance, member of the Flamsteed Society, makes his own representations on canvas, his own paintings of what he observes. In a more general level, however, amateur astronomers react to the same astonishment by adding words and concepts that not just explain, but also animate the celestial objects. I will explain this later. Now, pictures that amateur astronomers observe are part of a scientific wider movement consisting in capturing and stabilizing the visual experience of the universe by configuring pictorial frames that become linked to particular concepts that define what we are observing. For example, the term nebula refers to a specific visual frame that shared on media validates the existence of a particular celestial object. Thus, by delineating the contours of a contrast of shapes and colors, images render the object visually present, endowing it with uniqueness and finally shaping its identity as an object. It is important to consider Elizabeth Edwards' argument that scientific images not only verify the object, but also reveal a structure of feeling within science. Within the purely physical and objective realm of scientific explanations, other meanings, gestures, and emotions are mobilized and give rise to a different realm of ideas. For instance, the description that Bobby gives when observing outer space images is based on scientific knowledge, but also integrates statements that situate the celestial body in a more humanistic structure of feeling. In specific, he mentioned the notion of nebulas as places where stars are born, an explanation that gently aligns celestial objects with the reproductive processes in which humanity is involved. In this way, what was once perceived as static acquires movement and vividness, emerging as dynamic and full of potential. So concepts such as verve, potentiality, and creativity all mentioned by Bobby when explaining outer space pictures, serve then to frame celestial objects within a more humanistic context, bringing stars closer to social interaction. While amateur astronomers base their descriptions of celestial objects in scientific discourses, um, they also inject personal descriptions that enable them to inscribe a discourse of affection with celestial objects. For example, Sam, member of the Lawton Astronomical Society, characterizes celestial objects as old friends that come around every year and give you a throw. He says, when spring comes, spring constellations return as old friends. Thus, amateur astronomers mobilize personal descriptions that characterize them with personhood and identity, allowing them to establish personal relationships with these objects shaped by affection and emotion. At the same time, however, and this is the second part of my analysis, other non-human frameworks are also linked to these pictures. They become attached to broader notions of space, time, and material components. Such associations are part of a continuous dynamic in which astronomy employs a framework of perspectives when sharing pictures on media. For instance, consider the following NASA Instagram post that illustrates classifications being attached to the aesthetic of celestial objects. As indicated in the post caption, associations are made between the blue zone and a specific material, gas. Here, the aesthetics of the picture become mixed with concrete scientific materials, which are part of a wider order of nature proposed by science, where a variety of materials and their physical implications compose an order of things. The periodic table serves as the closest example of such a composition, illustrating the diverse elements that, according to science, compose the universe. To to better understand the interrelation between outer space pictures and the wider order of things, Yuk Hui proposes the concept of cosmotechniques, which clarifies how cosmological orders are manifested in the use of objects and how the use of objects is grounded in a cosmological order. According to Hui, when objects are used, they reveal a cultural interpretation of nature in which a moral participation happens. He says, every technical and objectual practice is anchored in a cosmological and moral order, a way of being in the world. Thus, according to Hui, every object mobilizes, actualizes, and is framed within a cosmological order when used. This point of view highlights the connection between the material world and cultural interpretations, suggesting that the way objects are employed reflects broader cosmological and moral frameworks. Despite outer space pictures being primarily appreciated for their aesthetic qualities, I interpret them as primary sources that demonstrate how objects contain a cosmological order. Hui's concept of cosmotechniques allow us then to frame pictures as objects that sustain a particular order of things, wherein an interpretation of nature is expressed. For example, the Instagram post illustrates the conceptual movement made by science, in which shapes and colors are associated with specific materials, which are part of a wider scientific order of things. So it is through observing pictures and engaging in digital interactions that pictures, along with their explanations, establish and promote a particular order of things. Hui also refers to Levi-Strauss to underscore the power of objects in installing cosmologies. Levi-Strauss suggests that the introduction of new objects and technologies can silently homogenize different cosmological relations into one compatible with modern technology. We can see then how objects, when used, can mobilize broader meanings and contribute to shaping cosmological perspectives. In this line, the expansion of social media has inaugurated a new way of establishing a relationship with the universe, defined by the fast and global circulation of images. Despite the appearance of fears of endless alterations of official pictures in the digital world, amateur astronomers consider that pictures on social media and the internet encourage rather than hinder interest in astronomy, attesting the power of outer space pictures to mobilize cosmologies. By sharing pictures, commenting on them, and practicing astrophotography, amateur astronomers participate in this movement made by science consisting of expanding a cosmology by putting objects into circulation, in this case, digital pictures. Something that goes in line with Walton's argument that is through the traces left by pictures in various places that they become effective in fostering engagement and interest. To conclude, the relationship between culture and outer space is deeply influenced by the role of pictures in shaping our perceptions, emotions, and thoughts about the universe. In today's world, telescopes, cameras, and the careful selection of colors and frames have become instrumental in defining how we experience the stars. From the personal attachment people feel for images to the sense of social connection fostered when observing the sky, pictures facilitate a wide range of experiences. Moreover, these images contribute to the construction of cosmological narratives that underpin scientific explanations of nature, further highlighting their significant agency in conveying various meanings. Overall, the interplay between culture and outer space is deeply intertwined with the visual representation of celestial bodies, illustrating the profound impact that pictures have on our understanding and appreciation of the cosmos. Thanks.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Joe Cimino. I'm an artist and art educator. And today for the symposium regarding material culture, I'm going to be presenting a project of mine, as Christine Staten introduced, entitled Leviathan. And in particular, with this project, I want to explore, or really the whole goal of it was to explore the material history of oil in relation to the whaling industry of the 19th and 20th centuries, more in the early side of the 19th and later side of the 20th century. The project was partially inspired by after reading Herman Melville's Moby Dick in 2022, which I took on as a summer into September reading. If any of you have ever read it, it's very long, but it is a very great book and definitely has lots of insight into this time period, albeit with some false science in there as well. But what we can learn from that as a way of literature to open up the gates into responding with visual art is to try and find methods of understanding history through image making. And as an artist, that's something that I'm always very interested in exploring. But to set the scene of this time period, as well as this context for what this work is about, essentially, I was interested in responding to the industrial practice of whaling, which is something that occurs a lot more in the 1700s as the Industrial Revolution is ramping up and this moves into the 1800s. However, as a sustainable practice, whaling as hunting occurs all throughout the world. So just to set that context first, but as an industry and as something where it's selectively choosing what to harvest from animals, it's a lot different and it functions very differently too as it starts to set the stage for the world we live in today. And so essentially, this industry moves well into the 1900s and unfortunately does still have activity today. But in the United States, it's outlawed, commercial whaling that is, in 1971. Now, the main reasons for this, for why whaling occurs, why this is even something that starts to happen alongside the Industrial Revolution and beyond it, is mostly for a substance known as whale oil, which partially is harvested from the blubber of whales, which is whale fat, as well as the spermaceti from sperm whales, which is located in the top bulbous section of their heads. and it's actually a substance that helps them with sonar. And so both, the spermaceti as well as whale oil were used as a light source, as a fuel to allow for lights in cities, on boats and towns to burn longer and burn brighter. So it fundamentally starts to change the materials used by the public as a way of interacting with one another. Whether they know how it was obtained or not doesn't really, necessarily matter. But at the same time, what it was also used for and what it was really sought after for was to be used as a machine lubricant. So it's something to allow for the power of industry to maintain itself and to really develop to the point where lots of hyper goods can start to be made well into the 1900s. And after finding that out, it transformed a lot of this project for me as to what I was really interested in and why I felt the need to make these type of collages. And really, it's not until the 1900s, as I mentioned, where this industry starts to decline, and the reason for it is due to the discovery of a better lubricant, which is that of petroleum. And I find this interesting that one industry that is lucrative in many ways and insane in others completely falls apart when something else becomes replaceable. And that replaceable material, our current oil or petroleum, is now what is shaping lots of our material cultures based in plastics, overconsumed goods, clothing, you name it. So that's the common thread moving us into the contemporary times. And so, as some of these key materials, be it with spermaceti and blubber, we also had the use of baleen, which was from right and humpback whale mouths. It's sort of the straw-like portion. This was then harvested and used for clothing and brushes and other goods, as well as also ambergris, which is a highly valuable waxy waste product from whales. And this is actually something that is still found today and sought after because it's a really great fixative for perfume. So again, there's still that continuity there. All that history being said, this is what really began inspiring the project of Leviathan. And these began as a series of digital collages that were taking a lot of inspiration, again, from Herman Melville's novel, but also the images of Joseph Mallard William Turner and his paintings in particular. So responding to place, responding to time, and responding to also the world that we're living in today and how ocean ecology is still very much affected by industry, an industry that has started well into that point in time and moved its way into this, although instead of sails, now we have motors. And with that, what I started using through making these collages digital was archival images, personal images, and those pulled from Google Earth and other map sources. And the reason for that was because this history is located within a period of time where documentation exists and the photograph exists and distortion becomes very prevalent in terms of how image quality comes through. I found to use those materials as a way of conveying the message made the most sense, and it conveys it a lot more clear in that way. And so also using a digital way of going about providing these images allows for them to be layered one on top of another. And how I began starting that, and when we're discussing discerning digital materiality, it's using place and maps as a area to start from, almost like the underpainting to the final form. And so with these Google Earth screenshots to our left are images taken from the northeastern coast of Canada after going through a Google Earth search, which is a resource I like to use a lot to start in terms of exploring, but it's also a terrifying one because it means we can go anywhere in the world just from our computers. And I find that dichotomy rather interesting. And so from starting there, it allowed for this underpainting, as I like to call it, even though it's a digital collage, to begin. And this then allowed for the collages to be built on top of them, starting from a place and point in time as well as location. And so from there, as we have on this example, this left image is the under area of the one to the right and really starts that full formation, but it begins through maps and it begins through layers. And so I find this use of place as well, looking in terms of how we see maps as well as land views to be rather interesting. And so with that, there's also the incorporation of stock photography and stock images taken, as well as those of my own, and transforming through a digital means. So on our left here is the original photographs and images, and then to the right, which may or may not be perceptible depending on your computers you're viewing this from, is the impression or imprint left over of the whale that has been transformed through a color layer. So on Photoshop, this essentially means that you're allowing for the background colors to come forward and transform the image that is going through that layering process. And what this allowed for was for each of the whales that are present within these images to be hidden and to also come forward as this oil slick like look to give again that impression of the okay, I guess it's just going to play that to give this impression again of the material that we're looking after and the main subject of the entire piece, which is that of oil and of consumption. And so experimenting with these layers and manipulating the images in this way led to some interesting discoveries in terms of how we can use digital means of photography, personal photography, archival imagery as a way of then better visualizing history in an artistic lens and through visual language. Now, from there, it also began to allow for me to experiment with my medium that I prefer a lot of the times, which is video and including sound. And so, with that, the final film of Leviathan was born and allowed for archival footage, personal footage, and stock footage to all exist in a timeless zone, in a place where history is compiled one on top of the other to show this continuity. And the final film is about 6 minutes. I'm going to be showing the first minute and a half of this to give you an idea of what this all sounds like. And I hope this doesn't skip forward, but if it does, we will keep moving. So what this then starts to allow for is a totally different transformation to occur. And so through using archival footage of whaling documentaries and those taken in the past, as well as then personal footage and stock footage, an entirely new scene comes through. And using again this more language of painting, this way of working color and form and texture, all to exist in this way. And so to break down one of the scenes here, on the top left is a footage taken from a 1940s documentary entitled Whaling in the Antarctic. This is sort of the later end of this industry. And then to the bottom was a stock footage video of a humpback whale taken from Pond 5's royalty-free videos, compiling this all together to make the first scene of the film. But with this last final scene, as just an example, of course, it's then using footage of my own taken of the Atlantic Ocean, same stock video, added in some color layers and some, blocks of area filled in with color, and then we end up with the final video or final scene of the film. So within this, a lot of the personal footage taken is again, just like those whales I showed earlier, embedded into the scenes. And what this all has to do in terms of materiality when we're working digitally is not in a haphazard sense of just take anything you can and paste it together. It's more about conscious experimentation of materials we deal with on a daily basis, especially on an online form where we can't necessarily go anywhere. So we're able to then acquire them digitally through, again, archival sources. Like I use the Library of Congress for most of the videos present in the footage, as well as then also sampling, cropping, and manipulating under that rule of visual art to then transform into something else and to use the documentation that has existed as a way for building up an entirely different look and feeling. And so as just some closing thoughts when it comes to working with materiality and thinking about our material culture and why even look at the whaling industry for any of this is that just when that transition happens into petroleum, nothing really changes. If anything, it just gets more intense. Ocean ecology is still affected by overfishing as well as noise pollution from boats moving to and from on all oceans. As well as that, whale populations are recovering, but it's still a very, rough battle in terms of getting them back to where they used to be. That the same mentality of going out, having this like lucrative business deal that's only really going to help those who have the money to fund said voyages still has that same model of venture capitalism that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And even relating it again to this idea of the capital scene or age of capital, we still see this occurring today. And so when we look at our mundane objects around us, be it kitchen supplies or clothing or even the computers we're all viewing this on, it starts to become rather interesting to explore where its material origins arrive from. And not only just the power of the object itself, but rather where does this come from? What is the history that leads us to this moment? And how can we learn from that to push us into a better future? So thank you all for your time.
Wow. Okay, I'm just going to share my presentation. Well, thank you, Joe, for this amazing talk. And now we're going to switch a little bit to objects. Hello, everyone. I'm Lu Lizo again. And it's my pleasure to share this project and paper with you all here, giving a little bit taste of how scientific analysis can help us to reconstruct narratives behind objects that lack of provenance information or basically lack of any documentary informations. And this paper is based on a course with Professor Jennifer Mass in 2022. We went to Sylvester Manor to conduct scientific analysis on site, collected samples and data, and then went to Professor Mass' lab to conduct further research. All the scientific analysis were conducted with the help of her and her teaching fellow, Hannah Duncan. They also taught and helped us on the interpretation of this data. So, here we go. This is Sylvester Manor. It is located on Shelter Island on Long Island, New York. In 1652 or 3, the Dutch-born merchant Nathaniel Sylvester, who had traveled through Europe, Africa, the Caribbean, and Virginia, finally settled on the 8,000-acre plantation manor on Shelter Island. So serving as a provisioning plantation for the Barbadian sugar trade run by him and his brother, the manor had been lived by 11 generations of Sylvester until 2006, with a very rich material culture left behind. It became a nonprofit education farm after the death of the last Sylvester descendant who lived there, and the rich material legacy of the family, such as archives and documents, as well as decorative objects, wallpapers, furniture, clothing, and all of them are fortunately preserved. So it's a very important early American archaeological site for exploring the American Northern plantation, slavery, Native American, and even food culture. But the research of the objects within the house hasn't really been carried out. And like many other historic houses in the US, there are always some exotic objects hidden in some corners of the house. And just like this black lacquer with gold tea box. Let's have a closer look of this tea box. It's actually a small one. It's like 5.3 centimeter high, 8.4 wide, and 14 long. It is made of 2 parts. The outer box is made of wood, as you can see here, with semi-black lacquer on the surface, decorated with gold paints. The surface decoration depicts Chinese people's daily life scenes and landscape with different types of trees and perspective architectures, the clothes, and also the distinctive male hairstyle, as you can see here. And there is an inner alloy part with a whitish knob and incised carvings on the lid. It fits very well with the outer wooden lacquered box. From visual examination and comparison with other Canton export wares, the techniques and motifs of this box suggest that it should be a Chinese export ware specifically made for Western markets in Canton around the, let's say, 17th to 19th century. But without reliable and primary resources, how can scientific analysis help us to know a little bit more? So basically, what do we want to figure out? I listed several key questions here. First of all, of course, I want to figure out what is this metal box made of? And then in terms of lacquer, is it made of East Asian lacquer material? And then how did artisans achieve the different shades of gold on the surface decoration? If we go back a little bit, you can see there are different color gold tones on the depiction of the surface. So with the support of Professor Mass, we were able to use two scientific instruments. One is elemental analysis, X-ray fluorescence, a portable one on the left, you can see that we conducted on site. It is non-invasive, non-destructive, which is perfect. And while the other is Fourier transforming Fourier spectroscopy, FTIR, which is on the right side. It was used to analyze organic and inorganic substances in the micro samples. We just need a tiny little bit sample and we put it, and it is supported on a diamond half cell. So, first of all, what did we find? The metal box, as we just asked the questions. So based on the elements that are presented in XRF analysis, it contains tin, copper, and lead. It is clear that this alloy box is made of pewter, which is a malleable metal alloy that traditionally contains 85 to 95% tin, with a remainder consisting of copper, antimony, lead, or bismuth. The use of lead and tin pewters could date back to at least 2,000 years ago, with a much higher percent lead content. Later on, due to its poisonous nature of lead, the remainder was changed to antimony or bismuth in the 19th century. So specifically, lead was removed from the composition of pewter in 1974. So even though this won't help us date the accurate production year of this alloy box, but it gives us a sense that this pewter box was not a very modern production or replica. And then we go to the other lacquer box. So first of all, this is a very, very simple illustration I drew for the cross-section of the tea box, which actually follows quite well of Chinese lacquer compositions as well. On top of its wood substrate, there is a ground layer and then black lacquer layer or layers, and then gold decoration layer. From FTIR, urushi is detected on black lacquer layer. So urushi is, urushi is a step of the lacquer tree. Scholars figured them out that there are three main types of trees provided raw sap for making East Asian lacquer. For making lacquer in Asia. So as you can see here, there are three types. And for the decoration, you see that even though they're all gold, as I just mentioned, you still see some, reddish colors underneath the gold, and you can see there are different shades of gold decorations on it, as I highlight here. So both XRF and FTIR proved the existence of iron oxide and vermilion in terms of red color, which are two main types of red pigments used in Canton export lacquerware. This is also documented in the only existed Chinese ancient lacquer treatise, Xiu Shi Lu, written by a lacquer worker in the late 16th century. Scholar Maria Zhao Patiska, in her doctoral dissertation, investigating into Chinese export lacquerware, black and gold, 18th century to mid-19th century, mentioned that the addition of silver helped to achieve the paler tone of the gold. This is also found in our Sylvester tea box, where we see an absence of silver in the reddish gold pen areas and the existence of it in the silverish gold pen areas. Oh, I forgot this. That's from the Xiu Chinese ancient 16th century treatise. And that's from Petiska's dissertation. So, but what scholars haven't really discussed is the existence of vermilion in helping creating the different shades of gold effect. From the XRF results on sample 2 and 4 that we took, the absence of mercury suggests the absence of vermilion in the silverish gold pen area as well. So it is likely that iron oxide served as a base color underneath the gold decoration. And adding vermilion to adjust the color shades was also mentioned in the treatise. The author declared the increase and decrease of vermilion or cinnabar determines the lightness and shade of the lacquerware. So the origin of the box is basically confirmed by technical analysis, and this is an export box made in Canton for Western market between 17th and 19th century. But without reliable resources, it is still hard to tell that where and when Sylvester family got this Canton lacquer box. But a brief history of the obsession of Asian export lacquerware since the 16th century Europe could give us a glimpse of the possible provenance of this box. So started from the 16th century, lacquerware from both China and Japan were introduced by the Portuguese to Europe. Customized lacquerwares were required to decorate ritual spaces like churches, cloisters, as well as palaces, and they became rapidly popular among other European countries due to their exotic, gorgeous, like dazzling effects created by superb surface decoration material and techniques. Following the Portuguese, the Spanish, Dutch, British, and other European countries started to import lacquerware, and in the late 18th century, the United States eventually joined in as an independent country to Canton. With the establishment of Dutch East Indian Company in the early 17th century, lacquerware became one of the most important trade goods, which were considered as luxuries and represented the owner's good taste, wealth, fashionable design, and high social status. And until the mid-17th century, Amsterdam became the European center of Eastern trade goods, especially the center of Asian lacquerware. And I just want to remind you a little bit here that around the same time, the Dutch-born merchant Nathaniel Sylvester moved from Amsterdam to the Shelter Island. Among all the Chinese export lacquerware, Canton black lacquer with gold was one of the most popular and prevalent choice. Canton has been an important port city for Western trade for a long time, especially after Qing Emperor established sea-ban policies to restrict private maritime trading and coastal settlements. And with the establishment of the 13th factory in Canton, export lacquerwares, which were designed exclusively for Western taste, became a popular local industry. Lacquer shops or studio could be found on Canton streets, and Western merchants, as you can see here, could easily walk into one, looking through the displayed lacquer objects and placed the orders either as souvenirs or their collections or goods that they would bring back to their home countries and sold with high prices. It is just amazing and fascinating that how much information could be found based on a small tea box. Even without any further archival research, with the help of scientific analysis and previous scholarship, the origin of it is figured out. It's a Canton black lacquer with gold export made in between the 17th to the 19th century, more likely 18th to 19th century. Based on the results interpretation and discussion raised above, it is clear that the black lacquer layer is made of urushi. The surface decoration formula follows Chinese ancient lacquerware treatise Xiu, which contains both iron oxide and vermilion. The differences between warmer and paler gold decorations are caused mainly by the addition of vermilion and silver. The reason why both iron oxide and vermilion are used is probably for achieving more vibrant color tones. Iron oxide could be a base layer, and the absence of vermilion and the addition of silver caused the silverish effects on paler gold decorations. So you see, even though these export lacquerwares were, as I said, mass-produced, Canton craftsmen still remain traditional lacquerware techniques, just simplified and customized. Whether this box was brought by Nathaniel Sylvester when he first moved to the States, or consumed by other family members in the US or Europe, this research can raise many interesting dialogues and gives us a glimpse of the Sylvesters as a wealthy family following the European tastes while pursuing high social status at that time. Also, the passion for Chinese lacquer, especially Canton black lacquer with gold wares, never stopped. And due to a large number of existing lacquerware, scholars have analyzed it from various perspectives. And technical art history is always one of the most important and contributive approaches. The production techniques and material choices were widely discussed, but still, as such a complicated producing technique that requires unique materials, certain techniques, and time, together with the special market and Western influences, this paper's findings can contribute a little bit more in the technical history and try to discuss more interesting or overlooked questions. And thank you so much for your listening, and can't wait to pass it to our, no, sorry, how should I stop sharing?
Sorry. Well, I want to thank all of the amazing fellow presenters. And my name is Rachel Nelson. And my aim right now is to get us all thinking about the ways that we connect objects to cultures and cultures to objects. Amongst the objects in Gallery 212 AB, Daily Life in Ancient Greece, at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, there is a centrally displayed red figure atticware stamnos, a kind of jar typically used to hold water or wine. The MFA's online collections database, as well as the description under the vase in the gallery, attribute the stamnos to the material culture of Greece, specifically that of Athens. The accompanying placard proposes the vessel may have held wine at a symposium, an all-Greek male drinking party. The nude women and their implied athletic participation would act as an erotic conversation piece for the attendees. But what might this display leave out regarding the vessel's biography? According to the MFA Provenance records, the stamnos was likely excavated from Vico Equense, Italy, a town near the Bay of Naples. Clearly, there's more to the stamnos' story than Greece. The point of production of an object may be more readily established than the object's other cultural contexts. However, sole attribution to a culture of production is often reductive to an object's narrative and obscures intercultural relationships, which supply it with additional significance. In the case of this particular vessel, its role as a trade object and a part of Etruscan material culture. Using the Boston Stamnos as a case study, this presentation questions the one-dimensionality of single culture attribution and highlights a few of the complexities of dealing with objects that are linked to intercultural trade and exchange, particularly in the ancient Mediterranean. Through an interdisciplinary approach combining archaeological and art historical methods, this case study explores how treating the cultural attribution of material culture as a non-static quality allows for a more profound understanding of an object's biography, opening networks of additional inquiry. The MFA stamnos measures approximately 6 inches in diameter by 12 inches in height. The decoration of the vessel consists of a group of mostly nude females engaged in the process of bathing, probably following athletic activity. 3 of the women are gathered around a large basin on a pedestal. One of the women has her hands submerged in the basin, while the remaining 2 are holding strigils, tools used for the scraping of sweat and unguents from the body. To the far right, a girl, likely a slave, in the peplos garment, stands with an unguent container and a garment over her shoulder. Some fictive architecture and decoration is visible in the form of a hanging mirror and lone Doric column. The faint remains of an inscription are visible in the space above the women, stating Hediste Kale, or Hediste is beautiful. Red figure ceramics are the hallmark of late archaic and classical Athenian ceramic production. The vibrant red and fine fabric of the fired clay, as well as the rich gloss of the black slip, is unique to the clay of Attica, putting the point of production of this vessel beyond question. Vessels of diverse shapes and decorative schemes were produced by ceramic workshops in the Kerameikos ceramic quarter of ancient Athens. Workshops established unique characteristics in the shaping and decorating of their vessels. The connoisseurial identification of these characteristics forms the basis for the modern classification system for Attic ceramics. The details of the MFA Stamnos have led to the attribution of the vessel to the group of polygnatos, a group first defined by Sir John Beazley based upon aesthetics, vessel type, and decorative subject matter. The group of polygnatos is made up of multiple artists who likely operated, if not within the same workshop, at least close enough that the painters saw one another's work. The consistency in decorative style and exchange among the vessels produced by the group suggests this degree of familiarity. The group was active between 450 and 420 BCE and is broadly characterized by conservative decoration and subject matter. There are 3 extant examples of female bathing scenes done by the group, 2 occurring on stamnoi, including the Boston vessel. The Beazley archive records 39 extant stamnoi by the group, of which 20 are reported as coming from an Italic context, 2 from Greek context, and the remaining 17 report no context at all. The map on the screen shows a dispersion of stamnos find spots from the group of polygnatos. Now, the high prevalence of Italic provenances for this particular vessel shape amongst the group may be indicative that it was a specialized product for export to Etruria. When this example is placed within the broader context of the Athenian Etruscan ceramic trade during the classical period, it further calls into question the singular cultural attribution of the Boston stamnos. Etruria became a prominent presence in Mediterranean trade over the course of the 8th century and occupied territory in western and central Italy as far as the Po River in the north and the Bay of Naples to the south. During this period, Ionian and Euboean Greeks established themselves at Pithecusae, modern Ischia, in the Bay of Naples, which is circled in red on the map. This became the first Greek emporium in Italy and a main center for Greek Etruscan trade. Pithecusae's strategic location and early establishment is indicative of the vested interest the Euboeans had in creating a symbiotic trade relationship with the Etruscans, rather than in colonizing the area, as other Greek city-states had done further to the south in Magna Graecia. Etruscan society flourished in the onset of international trade, and in addition to an aristocracy, a relatively large middle-income class developed as a result of the strong market economy. Both upper and middle-class households appear to have had the purchasing power to participate in the Greek ceramic trade as discerning and influential customers. By the mid-6th century, Athens had cornered the Etruscan ceramics market. The ability of Athenian ceramic workshops to respond to regional preference was central in their ability to do this. Workshops learned via tradesmen what kinds of vessels, shapes, and scenes sold well in various regions and cities, and they sometimes used this information to specialize vase shapes and decorations for their specific populations. Traders also shared with Athenian workshops vessels in native Etruscan shapes, which the workshops then imitated for the Etruscan market. Of these Etruscan shapes adapted by Greek potters, the most notable are the kyathos, a kind of two-handled cup, and our topic of discussion, the stamnos, which was likely made by the Etruscans in bronze or other metals, an example of which can be seen on the right. Etruscan audiences received Greek cultural influence and selectively applied their own cultural connotations to Athenian-produced wares. Jeremy Bundrick proposes that the nature of Etruscan reception of Athenian vases is best analyzed as a model of globalization, quote, a process in which those exposed to globalizing influences do not accept them uncritically, but adopt new practices and products selectively with discernment and attention to local needs and values, end quote. And that vessels in an Etruscan context, regardless of their place of manufacture, should be considered a, quote, part of local material culture, end quote. This application modifies a vessel's Greekness after it is adopted into Etruscan life, affirming its role in Etruscan material culture as well as acting as a signal of globalization in the ancient Mediterranean. A prime example of this phenomena is the use of the Greek alphabet to write the Etruscan language. In their earliest interactions, the Etruscans were exposed to the Greek alphabet, which they rapidly appropriated for their own non-Indo-European language. This act emphasizes Etruscan agency in Etruscan-Greek cultural exchange, as well as acts as a reminder that the presence of Greek cultural elements does not guarantee a Greek reading of the evidence. Etruscan written in the Greek alphabet is still Etruscan. Now let us investigate the Boston Stamnos from a similar approach, by placing it in its most likely Etruscan context, a funerary assemblage. Tomb assemblages offer some of the most complete and intentional depositions of artifacts from antiquity. The objects included were curated with care by the living, each item chosen for a specific purpose or significance. Attic vessels were deposited in Etruscan tombs with incredible frequency. Now, there is no documentation explicitly stating that the Boston vessel came from a tomb context. However, its state of preservation and examples of other vessels found in such contexts make it highly probable that it was taken from a tomb. The Boston Stamnos' depiction of female bathers is not a common decorative type, and it invites ample speculation into its meaning. Recall that it is proposed that the scene may have been interpreted as erotic and satirical by a Greek male audience. Greek women led very restricted lives, and their engagement in athletics was limited to their youth, and even then, it was very minimal. While athletic training was considered necessary for the development of male citizens. Thus, the athletic implications of the mature women in the scene would make it farcical to Greek men. This is a valid interpretation of the vessel in a Greek context. However, it was not found in a Greek context. In Etruria, different cultural norms significantly alter the potential interpretation of this vase. First, Etruscan women led far less restricted lives than their Greek counterparts. Not only did they regularly engage in what one Greek writer referred to as manly exercise, but they also attended symposia alongside their husbands, as evidenced in tomb paintings, such as at the Tomb of the Leopards in Tarquinia, Italy, which you can see on the right. In Greece, the only women allowed at these functions were prostitutes and slaves. To an Etruscan audience, the scene on the Boston Stamnos may have simply been an image from life, rather than a satirical inverse of gender roles. Like the shape of the vessel, it is possible that this scene was created with Etruscan taste in mind. Second, if we assume a reading of the nude female body as inherently erotic, the scene may have also served an aperture peg function within a tomb. Erotic vase scenes have been discovered in numerous Etruscan tombs, and erotic murals, such as in the Tomb of the Bulls and the Tomb of the Whipping at Tarquinia, are placed strategically in liminal spaces such as doorframes and passages, which required special protection. The Etruscan context of the vessel completely changes the interpretation of the Boston Stamnos from an odd male conversation piece to a scene from daily life, which served to protect the deceased within the tomb. The disparity of meaning between these two interpretations highlights what can be gained through dual cultural attribution. Hellenocentrism, or Greek-centric approaches, have been ingrained in classical archaeology since its 19th century inception as a scientific discipline. Northern European scholars, many of whom were from nations benefiting from global colonization, saw the Greeks and their colonial efforts as a precursor to their modern society. This attitude can be seen in the staying power of the study of unilateral Hellenization, a term coined in the 19th century to describe the adoption of Greek culture by non-Greek peoples. This tended to push the idea that Greek culture was superior and overpowering to other cultures, creating a perception that intercultural relationships were unidirectional. Such thinking oversimplifies the processes of cultural exchange and precludes indigenous customs in hybridized or appropriated forms. The state of available evidence is a contributing factor to ongoing Greek-centric approaches in scholarship. The prolific literary tradition of the Greeks, as well as the ubiquity of Greek ceramics across the Mediterranean, are invaluable resources we unquestionably need, particularly in the face of a complete absence of equivalent sources. For example, the Etruscans, though literate, do not have a surviving literary tradition. However, an over-reliance on these two bodies creates the potential for top-down methodological problems due to the lack of variation and the inherent Greek bias. The treatment of the Boston Stamnos is not unique. While a recent account of the corpus of extant stamnoi is not available, as of 2001, 73% of all stamnoi were excavated in Etruria, and a further 18% were excavated in neighboring Campania, strongly suggesting the vessel type itself is intrinsic to Italic material culture. Yet museum labeling practices do not currently allow room to acknowledge this. Attributing material culture objects solely to a culture of production when other attributions are possible is reductive to an object's biography and blocks further avenues of interpretation. Museums must work with the information available when creating object files, and the Attic origins of these vessels is generally a secure claim that does not necessitate speculation. However, there are many artifacts with at least general provenances that should be acknowledged, as in the case of the Boston Stamnos, in which a place of production-focused approach removes the vessel from the realm of Italic and Etruscan material culture, perpetuating a Hellenocentric view of the ancient Mediterranean and eroding the diversity and agency of other cultures in cross-cultural interaction. Thank you.